Hi, welcome to Video Games Revisited. Today we're going to be playing The Terminator on the Game Gear. Released by Virgin Software in 1992, it's a side-scrolling action game based on the popular movie. This game's almost identical to the Master System version, and as a result, has the same pretty nice graphics for it that are absolutely perfect for the Game Gear. As far as sound goes, the sound effects are pretty competent, and the music's okay, but the thing that impressed me the most was the actual Terminator theme is used on the title screen, which is good to see. There's a nice bit of story crammed in between the levels, and this story sticks quite close to the Terminator film, and as you play through as Kyle Reese, the locations from the film appear here, so you travel from the future to the streets of Los Angeles, through a nightclub, a police station, and eventually to the factory where the movie concludes. However, the style of gameplay doesn't really fit the film. Now, I appreciate they couldn't really make a game that followed the exact plot of the movie and just had you running away from the Terminator for 2 hours, but the majority of the gameplay that's present revolves around ploughing down wave after wave of punks and police officers that, for one reason or another, seem to have no problem working together to take down a guy in a trench coat. You do, of course, get to fight the Terminator at a couple of points during the game. However, these encounters mostly consist of simply ducking his shots and taking pot shots at him to knock him back, sometimes for quite long stretches of the level, which isn't particularly fun. You start off the game in the future, armed only with grenades, and your mission is to fight your way to the time machine to go back and rescue Sarah. And most of the game's main problems show up within the first couple minutes. Firstly, Kyle's jumping is really off. You'll notice whenever you jump, you end up going almost straight up in the air, making almost no progress forwards. And whilst there isn't much platforming in the game, this is still an issue. So when you make it to some humanoid enemies, you're stuck with your grenades for a bit, and these are an incredibly weak weapon, as the distance and angle the grenades travel both low and high aren't particularly great for hitting enemies, which wouldn't be too much of an issue if the enemies didn't constantly respawn in this. You'll notice as I'm running around, I'm having to stop and kill somebody every couple steps, and I have no problems with shooter games with lots of enemies, and I think there's nothing more satisfying in these kind of games than just running through and fluidly taking down enemies and avoiding fire. But the frequency of the enemies, the fact you have to stop whenever you want to fire, and the fact you can only fire at one angle really slow down the gameplay, taking all of the fun out of the combat and making it fairly monotonous. Things do get a little better later in the game where you pick up the assault rifle and shotgun, which thankfully have a higher rate of fire, which speeds up your progression but still doesn't make this a particularly fun shooter to play. Unfortunately, the weak combat isn't the only negative thing I have to say about this game, as there's no real indication of your objective, and navigating your way through the levels is also quite troublesome, and you really do need to have played through a couple times to make it through a level, as quite often you'll stumble into a situation that you can't get yourself out of. For example, when in Los Angeles, occasionally you'll climb up a ladder onto the top of a building, hoping that it'll lead you further in the level, and there'll be a helicopter up there that can kill you instantly and doesn't even give you enough chance to get back down the ladder. I've got nothing against instant deaths in action games, however it's a fairly cheap way to die, and the fact that you've got no continues, if you do slip up and make one tiny mistake halfway through the game, you can have to start again. I get the impression when playing Terminator on the Game Gear that the developers had their heart in the right place, and largely they've done a good job at creating a Terminator game with regards to including the story, keeping the locations from the movie present, and the general look of the game. It's just a shame that the gameplay simply isn't up to scratch, and with a little bit of extra work on the mechanics and pacing of the action in this game, it could have been quite a nice title. But sadly, this is another movie title that I really can't recommend. But that's all for now. Take care, and I hope to see you next time.